All right, let's move on now to, can you believe this, Jacques? Art Talk number 59.
I can't, wow, 59.
Yep.
That's a big number.
It is. All right, so this week's Art Talk is on contemporary Mexican sculpture. And for all of you USC fans, there's actually a piece on campus. Head over to SoCal, to the USC campus, and see if you can find the sculpture of Francisco Zúñiga.
Right.
I don't know if I pronounced that last name correctly, Sarah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
At least unless I'm pronouncing it wrong. We're both in trouble.
Well, I'm sure one of our, we'll have somebody correct us here at some point.
Exactly. So Francisco Zúñiga was born in Guadalupe, Costa Rica in 1912. And both of his parents were sculptors. His father worked as a sculptor of religious figures and in stonework. So his artistic inclinations began early, and by the age of 12, he was already reading books on the history of art, artistic anatomy, and the life of various Renaissance painters. And at age 15, he began working in his father's shop. And this experience, of course, introduced him to shape and space. And in 1926, he enrolled in the Escuela de Bellas Artes in Mexico, but left the following year to continue on his own. As part of his self-study, he studied German Expressionism, which was a huge influence on his work and his career, and also the writings of Alexander Hallmayer, through which he learned of the work of two French sculptors, Aristide Maillot and Auguste Rodin, and coming to appreciate the idea of letting expression outweigh technique. So at this point, he was still splitting his time between Mexico and Costa Rica, and Zúñiga's painting and sculpting work began receiving recognition around 1929. His first stone sculpture won second prize at the Exposición Nacional de Bellas Artes. And in the following 2 years, he continued to win top prizes at this event, and this made critics recommend him for study abroad. In the 1930s, he began to research pre-Hispanic art and its importance to contemporary Latin American art, as well as what was happening artistically in Mexico at the time. So his study abroad scholarship never actually materialized because of the Spanish Civil War. So various colleagues of his organized his first individual exhibition in Costa Rica. And the earnings from this endeavor earned his passage to Mexico City. And in 1936, he immigrated to Mexico permanently. Zúñiga's work often adopts qualities of pre-Columbian art, especially in his bronze sculptures, as we can see with Mujer Sentada con Rebozo, which strives to maintain this kind of timeless, mysterious quality in their boldly simplified forms. And it's amazing to see how he was able to get such a smooth, flowing, or draping quality to the bronze in this piece.
Incredible.
Again, we can see a more simplified bodily form in Desnudo de Cuclillas. Zúñiga is known for his nude figures. He often depicted peasants from Central America and really made a point to emphasize the full-figured body types. And this didn't come without controversy. To celebrate the indigenous woman as this stoic and heroic figure, and he really established this as a constant throughout his body of work. So here's an example of a wood sculpture of his. This is Seated Woman. And again, we see this depiction of a stoic woman, but he has such a mastery of the expression and the posture that it really tells a story of this woman. And you can see also the photo of him working on this piece in his studio. So here's one of his more remarkable pieces. If you look at the dimensions, you can see it's quite a large sculpture, and the posture and arrangement of the figures speak volumes. So he's really depicting what he sees on the street. And what's great about this piece is that it's really open to interpretation. Are they bored? Are they speaking to each other? Are they waiting for the bus? I mean, it really makes you wonder what's going on through their heads as if they're real people. And I think the scale of this piece is what facilitates that. I mean, it is life size. But again, it's really about his mastery of the facial expressions that lends this piece so much energy and story. So we're going from big to small in scale with this next piece. A group of 4 figures with child really showcases his pre-Columbian and pre-Hispanic influences. It almost looks like an artifact made in, I don't know, say 1360 instead of 1960. And a quote by Zúñiga states that, quote, sculpture is an ancient language. It's important that it is representative of a culture. So even though this was made in modern times, 1960, obviously, he really felt the need to highlight the history of his culture. Standing Woman highlights the strength of women that Zúñiga often sought to portray. Standing solitary with her shoulders back, this piece is a really powerful representation of female beauty. And again, like so many of his other sculptures, the deliberate lines and curves really add to telling the story. So now we're moving on to some of his paperworks. This is Rosa con Jarrito, and it's a crayon and pastel on paper. And so with this medium, Zúñiga can get even more detailed in the facial expressions of his subjects. We could really see her bone structure and her facial lines, and that gives this piece such depth. And it wasn't that this was someone in particular that he was, trying to tell a story about, but rather just to showcase the beauty of the everyday Indigenous woman, as Zúñiga is known for. And I think the fact that this piece is done on beige paper as well gives it kind of a more artifactual feel to it. Tres Mujeres sets more of a scene than the previous piece. I would say the detailing in the face is less, but it still tells a story of these women selling goods on the street. And what Zúñiga is great at is both highlighting this universal beauty of the women he depicts, but also making the viewer want to know more specifically about the women in his works. I want to know who these women are and what their individual stories are. And with his paperworks, Zúñiga is able to accentuate the beautiful colors of their garments as well. So we'll finish on this sculpture called Evelia de Pi. That's located on the USC campus, as AJ mentioned. And I'm actually a graduate of USC, and I remember seeing this statue, but never really realizing the history or significance of it. This is located right near Norris Cinema Hall, which is a film school building where there are movie screenings and film classes, and there are actually a few other sculptures in this area as well. And Evelia was from Veracruz and a longtime model of Zúñiga's throughout his career. And he always said that she was a universal native type. And I'll end with this saying that Zúñiga preferred figurative art because he found that the human figure was, quote, the most important aspect of the world around him. Thank you.
Wow, Sarah, I think to me, his pieces are very powerful.
They are, and he's working in so many different mediums, and I mean the bronze work is incredible because it's life size. I mean, some of them or many of them are life size, and that's a very difficult medium to work in. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Right, and to be able to get those curves and the drapings of the shawl. I mean, you can't overstate that, how difficult that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to go from that to pastels and if you look at the details that he puts into those paintings, particularly hands and things like that, I mean, it's incredible. He had a wonderful eye for perspective.
Indeed. It's also a little bit funny. I think not just your experience, but probably everyone's experience, that you walk by things and you don't really realize the significance of those things until well later, after you've experienced walking by those things.
Right, exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. That was a very, very powerful artist.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.